Now, one thing that's different in the church in Nauvoo, which will come into play in the lesson that I talk about on the martyrdom with you, is there was one part of the church's structure back then that we do not have today. And it was that there was an assistant president, or maybe another word is a co-president of the church at this time. Oliver Cowdery, for the most part, acted as Joseph was the first elder, Oliver was the second elder. You could maybe even argue that David Whitmer for a time, Joseph oversaw the church in Kirtland, and for a time David Whitmer oversaw the church in Missouri. But there always seemed to be two leading elders, Joseph and Oliver. It was mainly Joseph and Oliver. First elder, second elder. First witness and second. Well, Oliver Cowdery is going to leave the church and in a lot of ways be pushed out of the church in ways that Oliver Cowdery felt were unfair. And so when we settle the church in Nauvoo, Oliver Cowdery is no longer the second elder or the assistant or co-president of the church. But open up section 124 and look at verse 91 to 95. In those verses, we talk about Joseph's brother, Hyrum Smith. And in verse 91, Hyrum Smith is no longer in the first presidency. He is made the patriarch over the church, the presiding patriarch, because Joseph's father, Joseph Smith Sr., had recently died. And if you look also, really interesting, if you go to verse 94, Hyrum is appointed to be a prophet, a seer, and a revelator unto my church, as well as my servant Joseph. President, co-president, two leading prophets, seers, and revelators. Look at 95. That he, that's Hyrum, may act in concert also with my servant Joseph, and that he shall receive counsel from my servant Joseph, who shall show unto him the keys whereby he may ask and receive and be crowned with the same blessing and glory and honor and priesthood and gifts of the priesthood that were once put upon him that was my servant Oliver Cowdery. In other words, Hyrum Smith takes the place of Oliver Cowdery. Sometimes, and it's true, and we'll talk about this a little bit in the martyrdom video lesson, sometimes people say, why didn't Joseph, if he knew he was going to die, leave a clearer plan of who was to succeed him, how the succession could happen? And Joseph, frankly, offered a bunch of different options that could take place. But I think Joseph had made it clear. If you and I were in Nauvoo in 1841 to 44, and if we said, if Joseph is to die, who is to become the leader, president of the church? I'm fairly confident that 9 out of 10 people would have known the answer right away, and they would have said Hyrum Smith as the second elder, as the co-president, as the prophet, seer, and revelator in concert with Joseph Smith. This is what Bruce R. McConkie, by the way, before I read this quote, the problem is obviously, as you know, the reason why there's a succession crisis is not only has Joseph offered some alternative plans of succession, but Joseph and Hyrum will be killed at the same time on the same day on June 27th of 1844 in Carthage jail. That's a lot of what causes the succession question, is the first elder and second elder, president and co-president, die at the same time. It's a little bit like in the United States of America. If I said to you, if the president dies, the president of the United States, who becomes, if he dies in office or she dies in office, who becomes the president of the United States? Well, 9 out of 10 people know it's the vice president. But if the president and vice president die at the same time on the same day, who becomes the president? The answer is a little less clear for many Americans. And by the way, see if you know the answer. It's the Speaker of the House. Okay, this is what, I hope that answer was right, by the way. I think it is. See, I'm even unclear myself. This is what Bruce R. McConkie said about this idea of an assistant or co-president. Quote, after Oliver Cowdery fell from his high status, Hyrum Smith the patriarch was chosen by revelation to succeed to the position of assistant president and to stand as a joint witness with the prophet Joseph Smith of the truth of the restoration. When these two joint presidents of the church sealed their testimonies with their blood, the full operation of the keys of the kingdom rested with the 12, and Brigham Young, the senior apostle, became the ranking officer of the church. Since the kingdom was then fully established and the two witnesses had left a binding testimony, it was no longer necessary to continue the office of the assistant president. Accordingly, the office is not found in the church today. That's Bruce R. McConkie's view on it. And we have never had an assistant president, to my knowledge, after Hyrum Smith and originally Oliver Cowdery.